Hi everyone, this is Anne. As part of our video series, I just wanted to take a few minutes to give you a quick overview of how an archaeologist goes about their work. Of course, this will be very limited in scope of the profession because we only have a few minutes. I thought I'd use some local artifacts to show you how someone in the field goes about finding items and identifying them. But let me start by saying the most important part about doing archaeology is that you should only ever look in places that you have permission to be on. In the case I'll show you today, the property is near Deer Lake in Grady County, and it is owned by my neighbor, and he gave us permission to look around. So you might ask yourself, why would you want to look on his property at Deer Lake? Why not look in your own backyard? The reason is because his property has a high probability for a site. And how do we know that? Well, that's the sort of pre-work that archaeologists do. In fact, it's a lot of what archaeologists do, and it takes a lot of time. Not very glamorous, but it's necessary. So now let me show you what we found at his property. We found one piece of pottery and some lithic flakes, which are chips from a projectile point. The flakes only tell you that someone chipped away at some stone while making a projectile point, and not much else. If you wanted to, you could try to identify where the source material came from, meaning where the stone naturally exists, but that still wouldn't tell you how it got to southwest Georgia. The Pottery Shirt is obviously man-made, and we can tell a little bit more about it. I showed this to a ceramics expert, and they said it looked like hand-painted pearlware, and it probably dates from the late 18th to early 19th century. So it could be as late as the 1790s, but probably no later than the 1830s or 40s. Not sure if you can see all those fine lines running through the glaze, but that's called crazing, and it's something that happens to glaze. They're not actually cracks in the pottery. So remember, we were on this property because the landowner said we could look around. Archaeologists excavate properties for a number of reasons, but generally it's because the landowner wants to know what's on their land, or they're required by law to look into whether cultural resources exist on their property. Whatever the reason, the work process is pretty much the same. Before any digging takes place, we do as much research as possible. You can do this in a number of ways. Some of the most useful ones are looking at things like Usgs topographical maps, which are available online. These can tell you about elevation and other geographical features. Here we have the USGS for where these artifacts came from, and as you zoom in, you can see details like elevation and water sources. So as you'll see, Deer Lake is basically halfway between Cairo and Thomasville. We also check sites like Google Earth. You search for your location. You can use an address or just a reference. In this case, I typed in Deer Lake, Grady County, Georgia, and it takes me to the lake. And then from here, I just move around and zoom in until I can see the exact spot I'm looking for. Google Earth is great because it will show you what the property looks like today. Another source that archaeologists use is historic aerials. They can be obtained through county records offices and the internet. I don't have one for our site, but here is one from 1952 in Thomasville. Can you tell where this is? It's the area around the airport. Aerials are excellent ways to see vegetation and human impacts over time. We also want to look and see if there are any other sites that have been recorded nearby. In Georgia, this available is only information to professional archaeologists, but in many states, like Florida, anyone can get this information. Since we don't have access to Georgia's files, I'm no longer a practicing archaeologist, I'll show you what a form from Florida looks like. This is where we record all the information about the site location, what was found, etc. Each state's form is different, but most states do use the Smithsonian trinomial system, you'll see a picture of it here, for keeping track of sites. To be an example from a site in Colorado. It tells you that this was the 604th site found in Montezuma County, Colorado. And 5 is what stands for Colorado. By the way, Georgia's sites start with a 9. And lastly, you want to research available archival sources. Of course, this is only possible if written records exist, so for prehistoric sites it probably isn't of much use. But often there are things like historic maps, we have one here of Grady County, or letters or manuscripts, newspapers, publications, all those sorts of things which might reference your location and give you some insight into it. So after all that, then we go out in the field and ground truth the site, which could entail just walking around and finding surface finds, meaning just picking it up off the surface. That's how we found these items, or it could mean digging units and collecting all the data that you can. Suffice it to say, if you're going to do any digging, that requires a lot more work. I'll save that for another video. So hopefully that gives you a quick idea of what archaeologists do and how they work. I wish it were more like a scene from Indiana Jones, but the truth is, it's a lot more research, data collection, and analysis than digging in the dirt. Thanks for listening, and thanks for supporting the History Center.